Wendy Cole is a gender diversity consultant who helps agencies, businesses, and organizations navigate evolving social landscapes through education and training on transgender and LGBTQ plus issues. Wendy is a sought-after speaker, and she guides audiences through unfamiliar terrain with clarity, compassion, and lived experience, with the mission to foster meaningful change by humanizing what it means to be born transgender and LGBTQ+, offering a map where there was once uncertainty. So we're going to learn some stuff, get some breakthroughs, some ahas, and figure out all this. So Wendy, glad to see you. How are you?
It's great to be here, Robert. Thank you for having me.
Happy to have you. And so what did I leave out of that introduction? What are you all about? What has you so excited these days?
Oh, God. One of the things that I discovered when I first transitioned in 2015 was how many people, even on my street that I lived on, there were 3 gay couples that lived there as well. They didn't get me either. There was no difference between whether the people were gay or straight. This is a foreign concept in our culture, in our society. And I lived in that same community of New Hope, Pennsylvania for about 5 years. And during that 5 years, I was totally out, totally open, and talked with everybody. And I found that I really enjoyed that. And I have the ability or a gift to be able to put it out openly, authentically, and vulnerably. And that was confirmed by one of my neighbors, David, at a Christmas party on my first Christmas as Wendy, neighborhood Christmas party. It was great. I'm sitting there in the kitchen with David. Everybody's kind of trashed. The party was 3 o'clock in the morning. And it was one of my best Christmases ever. And he's got tears running down his face. And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "I have to apologize to you." I said, "Why?" He said, "I used to have horrible thoughts about people like you as a gay man." He didn't like us, didn't understand us, didn't want to have anything to do with anyone who was transgender. But he said to me, "You've been so open, so authentic, so vulnerable, and shared your entire life history with not only everybody in the neighborhood, but in the town and in the entire area in your first 6 months living here. And I'm now embarrassed what I used to think." And we became good friends. I walked over, hugged him, and said, "You don't need to apologize. You now get it. You now understand. We are born this way." Everybody goes through the same birth process. You did, I did. But the birth process is not absolute. You happen to have been, I assume, assigned male at birth, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And by the time you were 3 or 4, did you ever think you were anything else other than a little boy? And
No.
you played with other little boys?
Right.
Right. And you knew you were going to grow up to be a man, and you never questioned that. People like me, that's all we do. Because from the time I was around 3, in fact, I know from around the time I was 2, I had feelings toward things that were for girls. That was my first confrontation with my father, was at age 2 when he took my doll away. I have no idea why I had a doll, but it was my favorite toy. So that's how powerful this is. Just as powerfully as you knew you were a guy, that's how powerfully I knew I was a girl. But here's the catch. When we're born, our parents begin our socialization, in integrating us into society. So I was made to play Little League, go to Cub Scouts, play with other little boys. I didn't like it. I didn't want anything to do with it. And it was a constant struggle between my father and I. So by 10, I told my parents that I really was a girl. And I'd heard them talking about Christine Jorgensen, who was the soldier that came back from World War II as a woman. And these were transsexuals. And I'm going, oh my God, that's what I am. This was at around age 4 or 5. So at 10, when I told them, that was when they were they took me to a psychiatrist. I had 5 appointments. They talked with my parents, not me. And children were supposed to be seen and not heard. So, and the story is I was threatened with being committed to the psychiatric facility where I would be kept until I was fixed. And that scared the hell out of me. And that was a psych facility in Cold Spring, New York. I grew up in Fishkill, New York. So that began my life of repression and hiding. Because I was given the option: stop saying you're a girl, get on with your life, or you're going to be committed. That was how my parents handled me. And by contrast, on Demystifying the Transgender Journey, the podcast I co-host with Lynn Murphy, we have interviewed parents, mothers. And it's just amazing the difference that happens when a parent accepts who you say you feel like. One of the parents we just aired her interview, Renee. She had twin sons. At age 7, when she went into one of her son's bedrooms to wake him up on his birthday, he was under the covers sobbing his eyes out that I didn't get my birthday wish. And she said, well, what was it? And she said, I wanted to wake up a girl. And she had no clue before this. She didn't address it. She moved on with the day. And that night, she went in and talked with them. And she said, well, what if I told you it was possible? We'll find doctors, we'll find people, and we'll get you the help. And she said the relief that came over this child was palpable. Fast forward, both her twins, one now her son, the other living as her daughter, are now 18. They're graduating high school. Living as a girl from age 7 till 18, she is the most well-adjusted, happy child, and has girlfriends and friends in school and is doing wonderfully. And the only thing that happened was she wants her son, her two twins, to go to college, but she doesn't want the one to go to college before she has her surgery. And of course, our government has just increased the age on surgeries from 18 to 19. So she's going to take a year off and wait. But those are the stories that people need to hear. And that's why I go out to do what I do. I've volunteered for organizations in my state and my city to go out and speak, to go to community meetings around the state. It needs to be done. The reason that there's all this BS going on in our political world now about transgender people and LGBT in general is people don't comprehend or understand this. It's physically how we're born. During the birth process, second and third trimesters, when the body differentiates between male and female, people know about that. And they figured, well, you're born, you have either a vagina or a penis, and that's your sex assignment. but that doesn't define who you are. Gender is between the ears, not the legs. That's just a flesh, and it doesn't define who you are, period. What defines it is what happened during that differentiation between male and female. The brain also differentiates, but not necessarily in sync with the body. You get to a point where you just realize there is no way you can go on. And that's what I hit around 1970, 71. I decided, no, I can't go on anymore. And I started a transition. In those days, there was no knowledge of this. Today, we have cell phones, we have Google, we have the internet, we have all of this. Back then, nothing. And I went through libraries and everywhere. I found a psychiatrist. He started helping me. I made good progress. I lived off campus in an apartment, so I could privately do this and not be visible to anyone in my college. And end result was going very well until my psychiatrist took me as a quarterly patient to a quarterly meeting of psychiatrists in upstate New York. And I talked for about 3 or 4 minutes, 5 tops. And that's when one of the psychiatrists stands up and says to me, says to the room, "I'll see you all next quarter." Turns to me and said, "You're a freak. You should move to New York City and turn tricks like the rest of them." I had no clue, Robert, what he was talking about. We had no information. I found out afterwards that, yes, my diagnosis was psychological, no treatment, no cure. Same for gay people, too. Theirs was removed and changed in 1973. It took until 2012 for people like me, born transgender, to be recognized officially by the medical community and the therapeutic community. And now I had treatment through therapy, hormone replacement therapy, and any necessary surgeries, because the surgery is incredibly important, because I didn't realize during the first almost exactly 2 years before my surgery that I was walking around with still my, as I called it to my gay friends who would ask me, "Wendy, how can you do that surgery?" And I'd say, "I'm having my birth defect corrected." That's what it is. I needed for my body to be congruent with my brain. That's what all cisgender people have, and that's all we want. No special treatment. We're all human. Excuse me. So that's all I ever wanted, was to just be myself. When I transitioned and when I started my transition, I started with a psychiatrist and a therapist. Both had experience working with people like me. And that's what I look for. And that was the hardest thing to find in December of 2015, finding a therapist who had experience, because we weren't recognized. So I did. I found them. And my therapist told me about 2 years after I was living full time, and I'd seen her for 2 years, she said, "The two of us talked. We couldn't get over it. Meeting you as your male facsimile, my male representative, as I called him, it was just incredible how good I felt just being me." And they couldn't get over the personality change. I went from being withdrawn, depressed, anxiety-ridden, and just generally miserable as a guy, to happy, open, energetic, and enjoying being me finally, not having to hide that. The psychological pressures of that are terrible. And you grow up feeling ashamed, not because you were born transgender, but because of society and the socialization process letting us know that this is not acceptable. And that's my mission, is to change that part of society so that we can be accepted. And what I found over my first 5 years of living authentically is I would let people get to know me first as a person. And somewhere along the line, either within a matter of hours or days or weeks or months, as I got to know them, I would reveal what my past was and how I was born, and that this is now me. And invariably, it really made a difference in the conversation. So now what I do in terms of my public work and all of that, I openly, if I'm speaking to a group of people, my name is Wendy Cole. I was born transgender. I am a woman. I am female. Gender is between the ears, not the legs. And I'm an open book. Ask me anything you want to, and absolutely nothing is off limits. And then what's your question?
Oh boy, that's tricky. Well, yeah. So this is powerful stuff, and I'm proud of how far you've come, and like the lessons that I'm getting from what you've been explaining so far is that like I will never have a firsthand understanding of transgender, right? As like a straight white man, it's just like I can have empathy for you, but I'll never get to 100% comprehension, and it seems like there's so much disinformation and maybe people that scared, and it's such a low population. A lot of us have like never met a transgender, so it's easy for the lies to win, and then you counter the lies, and then the more lies pile on. But it's like when you're making me think about when I hear some of this or have these conversations, it's like, well, if transgender, if they're people that are just like you and me and want equal rights and just want to be happy, like would that change things? Or if they're not doing it just to have fun, or it's not just to get attention, if it's really a thing that I mean, who would choose to be kind of like, bullied, persecuted, be so unhappy, hear about like the teen suicides and all that? Like if that part of your misunderstanding had changed, would that make a difference? So there's a lot of like mental badness and clutter to undo, but just hearing that you went through this in the 1970s makes me think, man, isn't it so much better nowadays? It's not perfect, it's not solved, but it seems like we've come such a long way, right? Medically
Right.
and understanding wise of like this like marginalized group of people.
2012 was a big change. That was what told me that, yes, I can do this now. It doesn't matter that I transitioned in my 60s. Doesn't matter. I could do it, and I did it. In terms of how to integrate into society now, I took the position when I started this, I was always a woman. I was always a girl. I was always a female. I just had the misfortune of having my birth defect with my body coming through as male when it should have been female to match my brain. Um, but I will never put the word trans in front of woman and apply it to myself. And the reason I won't do that is personally for emotional reasons. I don't want to walk around feeling different from other women. I want to just in my daily life, when I go to the store, the supermarket, the local bakery, wherever, I just want to be accepted as just another woman. That's it. And that's how I see myself. And that's the energy that I bring into my daily life and then into my work. Is I'm female, I'm a woman. I've always been that way, and I know it. And I acknowledge the fact that I was born transgender. Transgender is a condition of how we are born. It's part of the birth process. I am convinced from my early days of filling out transgender surveys that come out annually, I filled them out. A lot of my friends and acquaintances around the country that I was acquainted with online even never filled them out. So I think the population is actually smaller than actually surveyed. And in terms of suicides, I am convinced also that there are far more suicides than what, because of being born transgender, than what is reported. If I had committed suicide in 2014 like I was planning on, no one would have known that it was because I was transgender. My wife knew about the fact that I felt this way from our conversation in 1978, long after we were married. I'd been told as a child by the psychiatrist they took me to, oh, once he has a career, he has a wife, he has a house and family, he'll forget all about being a girl. And I said, no, I won't. And that didn't go well for me either. But I found that there was a definite need for someone to talk about this with people. And I absolutely enjoy doing it. I'm not afraid to integrate into society. I'm very open. I got pissed off during 2022 of all the bullshit going around about us. And that's when I started in 2023 podcast guesting, going on podcasts, talking about it, being interviewed, all of that. And I met Lynn in a mastermind group, and I announced myself in the group. My first meeting, she unmuted and said, Wendy, we need to talk. She was doing a book and etc. That's a whole other story, but we've been in a collaborative relationship and friendship for almost 3 years now. And we started a podcast, which I named Demystifying the Transgender Journey, because that's what I do. Demystify it for people. And you made an important point, Robert. I do not expect you or any other cisgender person to ever understand this. If you've never looked in the mirror and said, I should have been a boy or I should have been a girl, you won't understand. What my work entails is providing a framework by which people can begin to comprehend this. And that's important because, one, they don't understand the birth process. And two, it's part their beliefs in just binary, male, female, and no variation is part of our Western European heteronormative culture, which we've been under for hundreds of years. It's also part of all of our religions. And it's also now part of our politics. And that has to change. The culture is inherently wrong, especially about the birth process and the variations. Nature is not absolute on anything. There's rooms for variations. There is an excellent book, Transgender Families, written by Dr. Diana Sorrentino, who transitioned in 1990 in New York with the help of a doctor, New York City. I knew all along back in the 70s that if I had gone to New York City and lived underground, I could have transitioned then. My life would have been very different. I wouldn't have been part of society. And in New York State and most other states in the country, and even in San Francisco, California, transgender people would be arrested, thrown in jail, and fined for appearing in public as female. That's it. That's what it was back then. And that's what they're trying to take us back to. But now I know they're not going to. They're not going to win, as far as I feel. We have cell phones, we have Google, we have social media, and we have connections. We never had that in the 70s. We've got tools now that we can organize, we can do things. My focus is you've got 20% of the people in this country who absolutely hate and fear and despise people like me. And I know I'll never reach them. And we got 20% or so who absolutely love us and support us and do their best to comprehend us. I want to work with the 60% in the middle. Meet them where they work, meet them where they have organizations, and just start putting myself out there to make a difference.
Very nice. Very good. And this is important stuff, right? Because imagine being a transgender and having difficulty making friends, finding employment. I mean, they're like you said, 2022, they try to take away the bathrooms. It's ridiculous. It's barbaric. And so this is important stuff. And so since this is like a business podcast, I like to kind of talk about there's the personal, then there's the business side of things, right? And
Right.
so my understanding, so you have the podcast, right? There's Demystifying the Transgender Journey. And you also do like speaking and consulting about this, correct?
Correct.
So
And
tell me about that.
well, I before this year, I was doing a lot of coaching of transgender people, and that also got me out into the public where I could speak to groups of people. And I love going in and having a group of maybe 20, 30 people, and just I'll open it up with a talk about this, something similar to what we just did. And then I open it up to questions, because that's where I can really make a difference with that type of a group of people, whether it's in a business, in a company, or in a community organization. Just being able to speak with a group of people and then answer their questions and have a dialogue with this. And what I've always found over the last 11 years is the more I get to meet people and people get to meet and know me, it begins to change their perspectives. And that's basically what I hope to do. I put together my brochure because what I found is people don't understand. I would be in a networking event talking with other business consultants, and they don't understand what I do, why I do it, and what the benefits are. And the benefits are very simple. People who are employed by a company or a business who are transgender, a lot of us go through this point of, even though I'm accepted and I feel good about myself, if anyone says anything to me that triggers me or whatever, a lot of transgender people feel that they are different because they were born transgender. And a cisgender person who's never met a person like that, and with all the controversy, they have no idea how to relate to that person or talk to that person. That's why I make it abundantly clear. Ask me anything you want to. And even with Lynn, my co-host, she at the beginning of our relationship didn't fully understand anything about LGBT, especially the T. Now she's just as passionate about this as I am, and just as knowledgeable. And it makes such a difference. So the brochure I put together outlines what I do, how I do it, and I invite anyone to contact me and go from there. But I haven't done this yet, but I'm perfectly open to doing it, and I'm talking with people on my city council. I've started that dialogue with them. If they have trainings that they would like to do for the police department, the fire department, or anything along those lines, any government agencies, I will definitely go in and talk with them.
Very cool. You're getting the message out there, helping people.
Right. I'm kind of doing it on a grassroots level right now. I'm doing it on social media, but locally in my state and my community, I'm joining organizations. So far, 2 women organizations that I'm connected with, and I've volunteered. If they need people to go out to, well, one of the founders of one of the organizations told me her board of directors has a real issue with her going out to a public meeting somewhere in the state and talking about LGBT issues as a cisgender heterosexual woman with a family. So, hey, I'll do it.
Yeah, you've lived it.
I've lived it. That's also the difference between me and some people who just teach DEI and work on that. I have lived experience as well.
Very good. And as you say, we have the tools now, right? There's social media, and you think in decades past, like even like you researching this, right? It's like, well, maybe there's a book in the library if you're lucky, or maybe you order something, or you go to some other town to that library, or get a VHS tape, and that might have been it. But now it's like there's YouTube, there's podcasts. If you want to learn something, you can't really learn much instantly overnight, but to have the steady supply of like, hey, I'll start binge listening to this when I'm working out, or I'll check in on whatever Wendy and Lynn are talking about on the podcast this week. You can just kind of keep that steady drip, and before you know it, you're like, hey, now I've ingested tens, hundreds of hours of content just because there's the technology exists, right? We can store it, we can stream it, we can listen to it on our phones. It's here now, and so it's up to us of any kind of learning to, we can squander it and stay ignorant, or we can use it and open our minds and learn some new interesting material. And when you've mentioned a few times that when you say, hey, ask me anything, nothing is off limits, has there any been like a wild question or something that just like made you laugh, or one of these questions that sticks with you?
Oh, the conversation always does bring up the word choice, which is why I always preface everything with, I was born transgender. It's not a choice. I did have a woman in a networking group ask me, well, how does a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, or even a 6 or 7-year-old know that they're a boy, but they should have been a girl? And I walked her through that same question series. I turned it around that I asked you. You were assigned female at birth. Oh yeah. And it was like a deer in the headlights when I said, well, the way you felt, that's how I felt. And that's how we all feel. And there's really more about that we didn't cover, like gender is a spectrum. It's not absolute. No one is absolutely male or female in how they identify and feel about themselves. It's a blend, and that's all part of the birth process. But yeah, oh God. When some of the people go off on you of attributing this to something that's psychological and you're a very sick person and all of that, there's, besides blocking or all of those things on social media, you can have a lot of fun going back at them.
Ooh.
And once you start getting into the facts and away from the God stuff or any of the other beliefs that they have, forget it. They're lost. They can't come back at you.
Yeah. Well, it's like you were mentioning earlier about the curve, right? There's the 20% on each side, and
Right.
it's like immovable either way, right? The ones that love you and support you, they'll never stop, but the ones that just hate you for no reason and have the bigotry and the ignorance, there's no moving them either. So why not put your energy where you can make a difference, which is in that middle space? And so it's been just quite an education. I've been having so much fun speaking with you, Miss Wendy Cole, and we can get that flyer that you mentioned at meetwendycole.com. Is that correct?
Correct.
Well, very nice. Well, and in these last final minutes here, I want to make sure that we've covered so much and you've educated me so much, but I want to make sure that we fit in like one last little tidbit, which is I'm in any kind of discussion, especially this one, I'm never quite sure what to ask someone to like make them really shine, right? Because like you're the expert in this, but I'll have some expert about, like search engine optimization. I'll be like, well, I don't know, like the exact ideal question to ask to seem so smart. So in this topic of gender diversity and LGBTQ, etc., do you think there might be a missing question that I should be asking you? I just don't know to ask you.
Well, this actually applies to all people, but I think that it is really important for any transgender person or even LGBT person in general to know. What I discovered during my transition is the most important part of my transition was working on the mental and emotional aspects of transitioning. The physical is the window dressing. I never liked cross-dressing because I wasn't about the clothes. For me, that wasn't, in fact, cross-dressing I hated because it made me realize what I couldn't be at that point in time. So I started my transition in January of 2015, diving into the mental work of, and my therapist was really on board with that from the very first session. All the beliefs that I held, which kept me safe as a child, all the way through my adolescence into my early adult life, and especially after the traumas of trying to transition and not being able to. I basically lived in survival mode for the rest of my life until 2015. That's when we started breaking down all my beliefs that were keeping me safe and getting self-aware and self-acceptance. Self-acceptance is so key to this. Accepting yourself for who you are and forgetting about society's feelings about it. Just embrace that feeling. When I used various tools to do this and with the help of my therapist, but by April of 2015, I couldn't wait to be living full time. I was no longer afraid. I was doing my thing. I was out there, and I moved away from my home, moved away from everybody, moved to a new town about 40 miles away, and just started living authentically. And I've never looked back. The personal growth from doing that, the personal experiences from doing that were so powerful. And so I have a firm belief in the powers of the human mind, and it's our thoughts and our beliefs that can propel us forward, can completely block us from doing anything or even seeing that possibility, because life is about possibilities. So you can see them and do them, not see them at all because of your beliefs, or worse yet, see what's possible, but because you're holding on to those old beliefs, you're going to sabotage yourself. And I see that on so many people's transitions, which is why it takes years for some people to transition. Or for somebody to change their career and hate my job, going to move, but no, I might not do that because it could be worse. Those are beliefs. Change them and you can move on. It's the power of the human mind. And that's what benefits everyone once you learn to deal with that and make changes. And as you can see, change is good. I've embraced change since 2015, and I continue to do so.
Very nice. Very helpful. So you're saying don't let the fear win, and that there's milestones in life when you're at safety now, and safety can be good, right? Because it's stability, it's security, but there's also to be there too long and there's too much comfort, then you don't take the risks that you need to then get to some new part of your life, which could be gender transition, could be moving to that new town, that new career, and then you get to the new safety and then figure out the next steps. It's helpful to look at the big picture of life in that way and to just not be so dang afraid. And there's resources, right? As you say, there's tools, there's people, there's friends to be had, there's information we can learn, and especially like working on yourself, having that self-awareness that you speak of. And that's why listening to a podcast such as Demystifying the Transgender Journey can be so helpful, because it can be scary to go this alone. You don't have any friends like this. It can be scary to see the psychiatrist or to like take all these kinds of actions. But a podcast is like a passive way to just start educating yourself without a big commitment. And then now you know what can be done, what is possible as far as your own transformation in many ways. And so we mentioned that website, meetwendycole.com, and Demystifying the Transgender Journey. And so as far as next steps, is there any other place someone should go after listening to this conversation?
I'm open for conversation.
Okay. And there's a contact button on Meet Wendy Cole, correct?
Correct. And this book, I highly recommend. Dr. Diana Sorrentino, and it's the Transgender Families, but going through the book, she dedicated her entire life since 1990 and all after her transition to researching this, the biology, the neurology, and the psychology of how it affects families and the individuals as they age. And it's an excellent resource. I highly recommend it.
Transgender Families by Dr. Diana Sorrentino. We'll add that link in the show notes. And before I let you go, Wendy Cole, it's time for the scary part of the podcast. Probably not too scary for you, where I try to stump my podcast guests a little bit by asking them about a fun or interesting quote or lesson that has helped them in their journey. So what comes to mind for you as far as a fun or interesting quote or lesson?
Well, recently, I watched the documentary Becoming Led Zeppelin. I love music, all kinds of music. And
including cell phones ringing. That's great music. That's okay.
Okay, edit that out.
Yeah.
No, I watched the documentary Becoming Led Zeppelin, and the way Jimmy Page ended it was just so powerful for me. He said, if you have something that's special about you, I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember it word for word. If you have something special about you, you need to give it work. Work on it. Work, work, work. And you need to believe in what you're doing. And if you have all of those and you stay true to that, you will succeed. And that's what I believe.
That's great. Fulfill your potential. And if you need help, you need some education in this, Meet Wendy Cole is the place to go. She empowers your organization with gender diversity training, transforming your workplace or organization into an inclusive environment. Tailored education on transgender and LGBTQ plus issues can foster meaningful social change and enhance community engagement. You go to meetwendycole.com, and she has this very excellent 8-page flyer. When I first met her, I couldn't stop talking about it. It's like every speaker should have this. It's like a mini PowerPoint presentation. You can find out everything that you want to know about her, whether you want to listen to the podcast or hire her to speak for your organization. Meetwendycole.com is the hub. And thank you so much, Wendy, for showing up, stopping by. You ran us through all the emotions, right? There was the sadness, the happiness, and everything between. I'm so glad that we had this conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Robert. And I'll finish it off by saying you'll find joy on the other side of any major